Welcome to the CORY Morgan Show. I see the third false spring of the season is past. We're back into winter again. It'll warm up eventually, I hope. I'm sick to death of this. But again, I like pissing and moaning about winter. I've just got no use for it. Never will. Coming near the tail end of it. Either way, the political season is going full bore. Lots going on. Going to be a packed show today. In a little while, I'll talk to Andrew Lamb from Gowling WLG. It's a large, massive law firm, but talking on the energy issue. And the way the government talks about, and as he put out in his press release, fast track in quotes on major projects, but nothing really seems to be getting done fast. And of course, lots of news and other things there. I see a couple folks on the comments there. Yes, this is live. Send those in there from North Run talking about CUSMA being impacted by supply management. And I'll talk about supply management in a moment. I don't even talk about the trade aspects of this particular rant about it, but that's another one of them. And CB fixes all. Talking about in free Alberta, there wouldn't be any supply management. I do want to start, though, by giving a shout out to Calgary's councillors and staff at City Hall. For those who aren't in Calgary, there's been a blanket rezoning thing that's now in the process of being repealed, which means hearings going on for days where hundreds of Calgarians are allowed to come in and actually speak their mind to the councillors and staff. And they have set up for the councillors and staff, and I wish this was a joke, a room full of toys, little squeezy things, and they have a therapist, and there's therapy dogs coming in case it all becomes too much for these councillors and staffers to actually have to listen to constituents for a few days. This is the snowflake generation. This is what happened. We started hiring them. I got a message. You're a bunch of pussies. I'm getting sick of it. You make six figures. Take it, deal with it, or find a job at a 7-Eleven where you don't have to think so hard. This is getting absurd. It's embarrassing to live in a country where this is where our tax dollars go. This is why you struggle to make the bills, to pay clowns like this to have a little safe space and a cry because they had to listen to you on policy issues. All right, now I'm in the right mood. I'll talk about supply management. So imagine living in a system of market control so stringent, federal police will swarm your home and arrest you if you tried to sell eggs from your own farm. Well, you don't have to imagine in Canada. Southern Alberta chicken farmer Hank Van Essen had multiple RCMP cruisers descend upon his property last year, and he was jailed for the crime of selling eggs without a government-issued quota. Or imagine a cartel that controlled the prices of a commodity so strictly that producers would be forced to destroy any product that they produced above and beyond the limits that the cartel set. Well, that's exactly what Canada's dairy industry does when up to 1 billion gallons of milk are dumped by farmers every year because they'd be jailed if they tried to sell it. In any other industry, such cartels would be illegal and charged with price fixing. In Canada, we call it supply management. The supply management system works well, too. The industrial milk prices are 30 to 50% higher in Canada than other Western countries. Families in Canada are being forced to pay inflated food prices to shore up a shrinking number of increasingly rich dairy farmers, and it's illegal to compete with them. Supply management was ostensibly created to protect the family farm. It's done the opposite. Since supply management was created in 1972, Canada went from having 45,000 dairy farms to less than 9,000 today. Starting a small operation is impossible because the large farms own all the quotas, and even if they're willing to sell their precious permission slips to produce dairy products, the costs are out of reach for any reasonable operation. Profit margins are generous for those dairy farmers who have quotas, though. They average around 20%. Compared to that, to the 4% that grocers operate under, or the 5% that restaurateurs earn, for an idea who's really actually gouging you on food prices. It's not hard to maintain high profit margins, of course, when the government will illegalize competition on your behalf. If one really wants to examine an oligopoly that robs consumers, though, they should check out the profit margins that banks enjoy. Citizens remain distracted from how dairy, egg, and poultry producers are robbing them, though, because those supply managed industries are incredibly effective lobbyists. They spend tens of millions of dollars on misleading information campaigns about their industries and their competitors. They also funnel countless millions into every political party and have paid lobbyists knocking on every elected official's door regularly. It's no secret that Maxime Bernier lost his bid for the CPC leadership because he dared to openly oppose supply management. The cartels quickly shoveled mass support towards the leadership campaign of Andrew Scheer, and it gave him a narrow win. And that ended rather poorly for the Conservative Party, wasn't it? But it was a fantastic outcome for the dairy cartels, because it reminded politicians of the consequences that face public figures who oppose them. The regional factor comes into play as well. Quebec has acquired a disproportionately large amount of Canada's dairy quotas. That's why the Bloc Québécois pushed legislation to try and make it impossible to tear down the price-fixing system, and the cowardly Conservatives were too terrified to oppose it. Conservative supporters should call out their MPs and party representatives on supply management regularly. It's a Soviet style system. It goes against every fiscal principle allegedly held by conservatives. The party should be ashamed of itself for supporting such a system that robs Canadians so boldly. But they're only going to feel that shame if the members stand up and push those members. Inflation's pressuring Canadians, and it's only going to get worse as the energy prices climb due to the war in Iran. Meanwhile, job losses are mounting across the country, and the GDP per capita continues to decline when compared to other Western countries. The country's in for some hard times, and to add insult to injury, Canadian families are being ripped off on essential food purchases to protect a small number of corporate dairy farms raking in huge profits. There are many things that must be done to fix Canada's ailing economy and give consumers a break. But here's an easy one. Get rid of the rotten supply management system once and for all. Other countries had such systems and they dumped them decades ago. In getting rid of supply management, the dairy, poultry, and egg industries actually got better in those countries thanks to competition, and consumers got fair prices and good products. So it's time to end supply management now, guys. Don't let the politicians keep hiding from you on this issue. When you're looking at your grocery basket, there's one of the reasons it's so high. All right, well, it's a crazy busy day. I better turn to our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is going on. Hey, Dave.
You know, if the CRTC would let us swear on the air, I would give it to you with both barrels today. Right? Yeah, last week you said spring has arrived, and I said don't jinx us. And it's absolutely atrocious out there now. Blizzard conditions, icy roads.
This is my apologies in advance. I didn't even take my winter tires off, though. That's usually the trigger for another snowstorm. They're on.
All right, can you leave them on until like summertime or something?
Probably. I'm too lazy and cheap to swatch them around anymore. I'm sick of that, too.
So one of the stories we've got up this morning is it's 6 days to go before the firearms registry ends, and only 1/3 of Canadians have apparently registered their guns. 2/3 haven't. Well, have you registered your arsenal yet?
No. I don't have any firearms.
Oh. I thought that day we were shooting out there on your place was...
those they fell lost in a boating accident or something like that.
I bet you're not alone in saying that.
Yeah, this is like the registry from before, though. Non-compliance will kill it. The government is parking up the wrong tree, but boy, they're going to spend a lot of millions of dollars trying.
Yeah, well, they got to make an example of somebody. So I think it's either going to be you or Derek.
Well, the government typically likes us. I don't know why they would want to come after us for anything.
No, I know. We always write good things about them, don't we? Anyways, yeah, as you said, lots of news. Breaking news. U.S. jury has come on side with a woman who sued Facebook and Meta because she claims their algorithms addicted her. As a 16-year-old, she was addicted to Facebook and Meta and all that sort of good stuff. And
see the class actions coming out of this.
Can you imagine the lineup now for people trying to sue?
The ambulance chasers are smelling a new stream of money.
Especially in the States where everybody's litigious. Yes. Other breaking news this morning, there's been a deal between Alberta and Ottawa, believe it or not, on methane reduction. And Alberta has sort of set out what they're going to do, and the feds have approved it. So that was one of the key deals in the memorandum of understanding that Smith said yesterday was going to be delayed and getting everything met. But so this is one of those things that has now been met. But you're not you're suspicious still, aren't you?
Yes. This is one of the areas of Alberta capitulation. This is one of the things we've done to please let us have another pipeline. Here's all the other stuff we'll control and do in order to get it. I haven't seen any of those benchmarks being met by Ottawa. I just see Alberta meeting them. It just feels almost like somebody's being strung along.
You know what? But Premier Smith seems still a happy camper. She seems pretty confident. I mean, it's her neck on the line, I guess, isn't it?
Well, I mean, she put out all the demands after the federal election and then just let that deadline fly by with Carney laughing at her. And then she's, went to the MOU and set a bunch more deadlines, and the Carneys ignored all those. She's going to have to offer Albertans more than a smile and show some dirt moving pretty soon, or there's going to be a problem for her politically. I mean,
yep, exactly.
Show some teeth.
It looks like we just avoided another school shooting by a trans kid, trans female in... down east in Nova Scotia, I think. Don't quote me on that, though. Was going to shoot up her school, and they arrested her and /him, who was planning one online with a kid in Manitoba, and they were going to do joint school shootings. And, it's just proving more and more that trans kids are
Well, disturbed. I mean,
Disturbed.
it's real. Yeah, they're kids that are seeking, reaching out for something, and I guess the trans part fails them. Some of them go. Most of them don't. But I mean, at least for a change, they caught it before it happened.
Exactly.
So,
Speaking of things that are failing, the gay pride parades across Canada have lost a ton of sponsorship. Like Calgary Gay Pride confirmed to us that most of their sponsors have pulled out because of DEI backtracking and things like that. So they all went hand in cap to the Liberals yesterday and asked for $9 million to fund their parades.
too damn bad. I mean, appeal to the public, guys,
There you go.
gals, whatever, whomever.
You do a lot of driving. You will have noticed gas went up again yesterday, 25 cents.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to miss.
Like $1.76 in Calgary now, but it's over $2 in Vancouver. So the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on EB to remove the fuel tax, save some people some money, the same way they did with Alberta. No government response yet. And it's been revealed that the Liberals spent billions and billions of dollars on these electric buses that you've talked about before, but they did no research on how cold weather affects electric buses.
We'll find out soon enough.
Oh, we have been finding out, haven't we? All that, the Edmonton failures.
Yeah, well, Calgary still has to find out because they've spent $150 million on something that they still haven't gotten yet.
They're gonna find out.
Yeah,
quick. And we got some interesting intrigue at Calgary City Hall. RCMP are raiding people left, right, and center. Sean Chu, former councillor. Andre Chabot, former councillor. And most interestingly, Jody Condek, our former mayor. Of course, the RCMP not saying anything about it. They're just sort of putting the cloud of suspicion over everybody.
Well, that's the par for the course out of the RCMP. So just poke the hornet's nest, make everybody speculate, and then not let us know.
Yep.
Anything. If I was ticked off, if anybody would be most ticked off, it should be these councillors, if indeed there's nothing going on. I mean, look at the pall now.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody thinks Andre Chabot is corrupt.
Yeah.
No, it's not good for those people. And just happening as we speak right now, Daniel Smith holding a press conference on new initiatives to battle crime. So I'll get that story up as soon as I'm done with you.
All right. Well, looking forward to that story and apprate the update. I guess we'll see you later on the pipeline.
See you tonight on the pipeline. Yeah.
Right on.
4 hours.
Thanks, Dave.
You bet.
So that is some of the news updates on stuff that's breaking and going crazy. It's been busy around here with news items. And the reason we can continue like this, the reason that newsroom is full of reporters for Dave to chase around and put on these things is because you guys have been subscribing. So this is where I got to nag and remind you guys, it's $10 a month, $100 for a year. Get past that paywall, get directly into those articles and stories as they break. And of course, help support independent media and keep us rolling. If you've already subscribed, thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, come on, guys, get on there. You never thought twice about paying for a newspaper to come to your house. This is pretty much the same thing. This is just a new form of media. All right. Yeah. So the timing of this is interesting. Perfect for the guest I have coming up very shortly here too, because that memorandum of understanding that Premier Smith signed with Mark Carney, a lot of people were pretty skeptical here in Alberta. And sure enough, the deadlines are about to come and go, and a bunch of those bars have not been met. Is it possible to get large projects done in Canada? Is there actually a will on the part of the government to get these done, or is the federal government just stringing people along, or do they actually have good intentions, but they just hamstring themselves with their own regulations and requirements, and they're just afraid to take on their own bureaucracy? I don't know. But Premier Smith is really getting into a precarious position here with conservative voters who are getting very tired with her constantly moving the goalposts to accommodate Carney, who continues to make promises and not follow through. And it's going to catch up with her soon unless we start seeing something substantial. And I don't think a methane reduction project in Alberta is what Albertan voters wanted to see. Either way, there's a lot more to it. And head of oil and gas and partner with Gowling WLG, Andrew Lamb, is going to come in and speak to us about some of these things and what's going on with that fast track narrative, if it's just a narrative or not. So let's bring Andrew in and discuss this. Hello. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Corey. Thanks very much for having me.
So, yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I don't know if you caught that prior to when I pulled you in, but it just kind of landed with your press release that came out last week on this sort of subject. what's going on? Like, is there really going to be any fast tracking of projects, or are we just spinning our wheels?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's too early to tell. I don't think there's been any fast tracking so far on any of the 15 projects that have been referred to the major projects office. One of which is the same. It's the carbon capture and storage project, the formerly known Pathways Alliance is working on. So I think it's unfortunately too early to tell. I think the intent is in the right place, but there hasn't been any discernible, tangible improvements so far.
So, what would have to be done then to make this more than an aspirational document or endeavor with all of these projects? And yeah, it's not just oil and gas. There are a lot of other major notions they've come up with, but the clock's ticking and our economy's ailing. What are the roadblocks holding them up?
With respect to the MOU,
Well, that's one of them, certainly.
well, I think one thing to remember too is that regulatory hurdles and regulatory uncertainty is a big negative for projects, but no project ever went ahead just because there was regulatory certainty. There needs to be the commercial underpinnings in place, and those can take months and months and years, and then your entire understanding of the world changes on a dime. So it's not necessarily the major projects office or anything else to do with Canadian regulations that is impeding these projects. There needs to be the commerciality there in the first place. We do need to make sure that we're a welcoming place for investment, and I think that's what the major projects office is trying. The signal is trying to send. I'm not sure if it's been received or fully believed yet. It would be helpful to get a couple through past the goal line to show that it does make a tangible difference.
Well, yeah, and that's part of it. I mean, it's not just your statement before kind of covered a bit of that. Companies understand it's going to take some time, and it'll take a while to get through regulatory burdens, but they need some degree of guarantee, knowing that it'll actually get done. And we've seen a lot of big projects get the rug pulled out of them after companies have made some rather large investments of time and capital to try and get them moving. And I don't think we're seeing those assurances from the government. They're just talking about adding more processes.
Well, that's certainly not the signal they're trying to send. They're trying to send that there is going to be more streamlining, less duplication. It may not necessarily be faster, but it is going to be, once you get that approval, that there's no other approvals that are necessary, sort of a one-stop shop sort of thing. So I don't think it is going to impose more layers of bureaucracy. I think it's more just a question of showing that it's going to make a difference.
So getting back to oil and gas, if it's a pipeline, which is often one of the big hangups we have, is getting one, whether it's east or west. A lot of the groundwork's already been done. It seems almost though as if we were starting from scratch. I mean, how much was put into the amount of studies and regulatory issues and things, for example, with the Northern Gateway line or considering the Energy East one? And I understand the proponents of those are now gone and you'd be starting again, but can't some of that be dusted off almost and reused? I mean, you know, geography hasn't changed. A lot of things haven't changed. Why are we making them begin as if this process never began in the first place?
That's a fair question. I think it depends a lot on the amount of time that's passed. I do know that applications do stay with various regulatory bodies even after the proponents have asked that they be suspended for a time. So hopefully there are some studies that can be leveraged for sure, but players change, and it's more the people that have to be given notice of these applications change, and they're going to be given a new period of time to file statements of concern or other objections. That's probably the main obstacle.
Yeah.
Not so much getting the studies done themselves.
So if the major projects office, I mean, if it does clear out some of those, regulatory hurdles and problems, the things that have been holding things up, another issue, I don't know if you can speak so much to, but the political end of it, Prime Minister Carney's been asked a couple of times, what about the opposition from some Indigenous groups or even from the Premier of British Columbia? Now, constitutionally, neither of those entities should have the power to veto a line. I mean, their participation in consultation is very important, of course, but Prime Minister Carney doesn't feel or doesn't sound like he's willing to exercise the constitutional authority to finally put the foot down and say, look, it's going to have to go ahead. That's sort of one of those aspects I think that would keep companies, not feeling confident. I mean, why start the process if the prime minister won't promise it's going to get done?
Fair. Yeah. And, the federal government's hands are tied a little bit just due to the nature of confederation. Even if the major projects office gives a particular project, whether it's the West Coast pipeline or something else, all the federal approvals that it needs, there's a whole bunch of, just speaking about provincial governments for a second, there's a bunch of ancillary permits and approvals and licenses that are needed that are still within the provincial jurisdiction just to support a project going through. That can be anything from work camps to, other rights to use land. And then when you get to the First Nation side, there's always the chance of a challenge being filed at court and an injunction or other delay tactics being filed. So you're right. Even if the federal government does everything it can do to push a project through, there is still this risk. I'm not sure if it's that much different in other jurisdictions. The states would be a good example. I think there's sort of two types of risk. There's structural risk that you can't really avoid, but then there's also what I call like a ministerial risk, which is, just the government of the day, whether it's provincial or federal, deciding that a project's just not going to go ahead. And we saw that, for example, in the States with the expansion of the Keystone XL, right? It was the Biden government that said, well, that this just isn't going ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, your statement did say that Canada is falling behind some key competitors, such as the United States. I mean, we're very similar jurisdictions. So what is it the Americans are doing, though, that is still managing to get things done, whereas we can't? Because they do have obstacles. I mean, there was North Dakota, of course, there was quite a lot of bad issues with the pipeline trying to get rolling over there. There's been a lot of opposition in Michigan to some of our existing infrastructure, even trying to keep it rolling out there. But still, it appears that their economy is still moving along. They can get some major projects done. So what are they doing that we can't?
I think it's their relationship with oil and gas generally is a little bit different. I'm not an expert on the division of powers in the United States, so I can't say when the federal government can just play the trump card and force something through. That's certainly not the case in Canada, though. So I think that goes to what I was saying. That's like a structural risk that's very difficult to work around unless you can get all the governments to come to the table.
So getting other governments to the table, is that then, you mentioned, of course, British Columbia, for example. I mean, they can't necessarily veto a line, but they could throw a heck of a lot of delays into it through existing processes. Is there a way to facilitate, or is that part of, the services your firm does, things like that? I mean, to get between the governments and mediate if possible. I mean, it's
Exactly, right. It's you have to treat governments as a stakeholder and convince them, show them that this is for their benefit. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Lobbying is certainly one of them, but bringing them in as a participant to some degree as well is a tried and true method of getting governments on side. First Nations as well. We've seen that really works.
Yeah, well, everybody has to see a benefit. I mean, I can understand that if you're living down from a pipeline right away and they're saying we're going to crash this through there and nothing is coming your way from that, you're not seeing anything tangible for yourself, then you're probably not going to be thrilled with it. So demonstrating that British Columbia would get some revenue and be able to spread that around, or Indigenous bands would be able to participate in the construction and ongoing work with it. But it just sometimes doesn't seem to be quite enough, or they're not getting that message out clearly enough to people, perhaps. A lot of people seem to think that they're taking on all the risk.
Yeah, sorry, you froze there for a second, Corey.
Oh, okay.
Can you repeat your question?
Well, I was just saying that I guess reaching people to be able to demonstrate that there is benefits for them on that end if they have something happening in their area, as opposed to just seeing all the risks. Is it a matter of the government's just not been communicating it effectively?
I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think taking the BC government, for example, I think they have a lot of internal pressures that's probably keeping them from moving things forward as quickly as, for example, the Alberta government did with this MOU. So I think it's a political reality that we're just unfortunately faced with in Canada. We have a very diverse population from coast to coast, and not everybody's aligned on oil and gas or, just natural resource development.
Yeah, well, perhaps, going into some of the other projects and the major projects, maybe that would help some of the oil and gas down the road. Like there's mining prospects, things like that in Eastern Canada. The Ring of Fire. Again, there's always opposition. There's opposition to everything if you try something, but presumably you get it done. Is there a better chance maybe of getting some of those rolling along to sort of,
I
guess,
think so, right?
things
The problem with the pipeline that crosses provincial boundaries is that you're dealing with two provinces, and one may not see the same level of benefit. The Ring of Fire, for example, and provinces that are purely within British Columbia, they're going to see benefit for sure. Construction of a pipeline, even construction of an LNG terminal, that'll create a temporary boost in jobs. But BC wants to see, okay, we're taking on a lot of the risk of oil spills, things like that. How are we compensated for that risk in the long term?
Yeah, well, I mean, right now, perhaps a case could be made to some people if we had, it takes more and it's easier said than done. But if we had a more secure domestic supply, there could be ways we could pad ourselves against price shocks from international events like we're seeing right now in Iran. But we just don't have the ability to be able to do that sort of thing right now. If now is a good time to make that case to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, are you referring to sort of having like a strategic reserve of oil like most countries do, or?
No, I was speaking more along the lines, I guess, of if there was enough revenue generated from oil royalties, oil transfers, that at a time when prices get high enough, that's where you could get programs where things such as carbon tax breaks at the pumps or heating bills or things like that, where the government can reduce. So, if we're exporting at a very high price, the government's bringing in a higher revenue from that. They can be able to use that for local consumers, like just showing that what's in it for me sort of aspect to people on the ground who aren't thinking of the bigger picture, but they do have to wonder how they're going to heat their house or fill their car.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you for sure. And I'm not an expert on equalization between the provinces, but maybe that's something that should be looked at. When oil reaches a certain threshold, oil prices, then maybe the sharing between the provinces differs a little bit. That's certainly what the provincial government does. Royalties they're scaled and they're tied to the price of oil and gas in some situations.
Yeah, well, and it benefits Alberta strongly whenever the oil prices go high, but then the rest of the country tends to suffer a little, and that leads to a lot of the regional friction we already have. So, I mean, again, if we could just demonstrate that, because those high revenues still lead to more federal taxes that do get to everybody eventually, but maybe perhaps not enough Canadians understand that.
I agree. Yeah, I think Alberta does its best. I think to explain what's good for Alberta is good for Canada. But sometimes I think it's a hard message for the rest of the province rest of the country to follow when employment rates are differing from province to province and things like that.
Yeah, well, there are no simple answers, but we really got to start pursuing some when times are getting tough. Before I let you go, then what is it that your company provides in this end, and how can people find out more about this and what you guys do?
Gowling WLG, my law firm, has excellent relationships both with provincial and the federal government and numerous First Nations in Western Canada, and we also have the industry experience to be able to bring everybody to the table and get deals done.
Great, yeah, because that's, I guess, kind of what we talked around in so many ways. Maybe the federal government, the provincial government, the Indigenous bands aren't doing very well getting to the table themselves. Maybe another party like yourselves can get in there and facilitate it, because, boy, we really need to get something done.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us and speaking up on this issue in general. Hopefully we can get things done, because there's just so much potential in Canada, and it's just painful to watch how slowly we manage to bring it to market for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks very much, Corey.
All right. Thank you. So one more time, folks. Yeah, that is Andrew Lamb from Gowling WLG. And he just, the issue is ongoing and frustrating. It feels circular at times. I mean, we know the benefits, but we just can't seem to get it over that line. We trip over ourselves. And maybe that's what it'll take. Because, I know everybody's got their feelings about lawyers necessarily, up and down and too, but we get those feelings about politicians. There's different interests, and perhaps a mediation from another party, whether it's law firms and such, can work around the political aspects of what's going on too, because Premier Smith, Carney, they got their other interests. They have other things going on. It makes it difficult for them to come to conclusions with anything. But it just gets maddening. We just keep going and going, and nothing just seems to get done. All right, let's just have a look. Yeah, lots of the carbon capture and things in the comments. Just so much else going on. As Dave mentioned, let's turn the page over to the gun grab. For those not familiar with it, an ever-growing list of firearms that the federal government just keeps illegalizing and illegalizing and illegalizing. And firearms owners just aren't cooperating. They did their trial project out in Glace, Nova Scotia, for people to turn in their guns for the gun buy, and it was like 25 guns came in or something like that, and they called it a success. Either way, it's really starting to come to a head now, and there's emails coming out to people who do have firearms that were in the restricted list that are now banned, and there's, I believe, like 4 days left to turn them in, or there will be potentially consequences. It's just so stupid. This isn't where the problem is. It's not the law-abiding firearm owners who had registered them. And the other issue is a whole whack of the ones that were illegalized weren't registered because the registry was only for restricted firearms. There's a whole load that have been banned, but they weren't restricted to begin with. And I tell you what, people aren't eager to add theirs to any registry or let the government know they have them as they're coming out. It's just a waste of time and money because it's all people who weren't committing crimes in the first place. I saw a post on X with another release because the government's actually it was a letter that came to the Western Standard about the cigarette smuggling issue and that sort of thing going on, and illegal cigarettes. I mean, it's funny when the government or anybody makes a commodity really expensive. There's going to be a black or gray market. But you don't want to know why the government can't get the illegal cigarettes under control? Because it's coming through the reserves. Everybody knows that, but the government's terrified of enforcing the law on reserves. I mean, we can't even dig up these alleged bodies that are buried in Kamloops, can we? But firearms is another aspect of it because police forces, our own statistics, the Canadian Justice Department, they find the same thing. They know it. The majority of firearms crimes committed in Canada are committed by guns that were smuggled into Canada from the United States, not law-abiding firearm owners. But where did they come in? The Mohawks brought them across the river out east. Well, they don't want to get into that. So they'd rather chase down duck hunters and sport shooters and people who just like to collect firearms who never committed any crimes because it looks like you're doing something, but you aren't. You're not helping reduce crime whatsoever. What you're doing is stealing people's property who weren't bothering anybody. Firearm owners know this. That's why they're not cooperating, and these deadlines just keep coming, and nobody gets there. It's going to be a mess. We'll see. I worry. Most of these people who own lots of firearms and things like that as collectors, they're never going to harm a fly unless somebody comes to try and take their property, and that might even include the government. I do not want to see that happen. I really feel for any of the law enforcement officers if they get tasked to go to households and to steal the property or charge law-abiding firearm owners because of this government law. Because somebody could get really, really hurt. I really hope not. Why provoke when you didn't have a problem? They're creating a problem. And Jacqueline Littler saying the guns are also coming in at ports. And that's true. That's another aspect, speaking of government cowardice. Because if you look at the stats on the West Coast, for example, I think it's only 1% of containers only get actually searched by border services out in the West Coast. All those containers coming in, and that's how the fentanyl and many, many other things are coming in. Why won't the government crack down there? Because they're scared out of their wits of the Longshoremen's Union, which is tied in with organized crime on the ports. Everybody knows this, but the government is too cowardly to take on real crime issues, so they crack down on citizens all the time. And this snowballs into other issues. This goes into why we're having trouble with the United States, why President Trump is getting on our case. And I've been very critical of Trump on a lot of things, but he's right on a lot of things. I think, Trump exaggerated the amount of fentanyl necessarily that's coming from Canada down to the south, but we're still a threat to American security. And how is that? Well, we see this just with the government's own audit and report on immigration. Look at this. Foreign students on visas, okay? 150,000 of them were flagged by the schools where they were supposed to be attending. They got student visas to come to Canada. 150,000 of them flagged over a couple of years. It was basically the schools doing their due diligence, contacting the government saying, hey, these guys with these student visas didn't show up for school. Oh, so then the government investigates. They checked 4,000 of the 150,000 that seem to have skipped out. 1,600 of those they wrote off right off the bat because, well, said the student never returned a call. No crap. Gee. And then there were 600 out of all of that, once they started getting down to what was left, and they managed to reject those visas, but then they ended up still staying here, and some reapplied to get a new visa. They're abusing the visa system. It's right in our face. Now, what is the motivation of the student who pretended to be a student to get here on a visa and not go to school? I would imagine a lot of them, maybe it's just economic. They just snuck off and went to work somewhere, and they're just trying to work, be in a country that's nicer to wherever they came from, and that was a path. But how many came from Iran? How many came from Gaza before everything hit the fan there? How many came from terrorist hotspots? And they were smart enough to know it's tough to get it in the United States, but Canadians are stupid. I can just pretend to be a student. They'll let me in. I'll ignore the student visa requirements because the country doesn't follow through on things. And then I'll sneak across into the United States and do my dastardly terrorist sort of things down there. That is why we start getting crap from our southern neighbors. Because whereas we can't get on a high horse with a lot of stuff if we can't protect our own borders, because the borders of the United States are very porous. I worked surveying down on the Alberta, Montana border years ago. You know what's on the border down there? A broken down barbed wire fence. That's it. If somebody really wants to get from Canada into the United States, it's not that hard if you were sneaking. I mean, I know there's patrols, I know there's drones, I know there's things trying to keep track, but guys, that border is massive and that area is vast. I'm always surprised when somebody gets caught doing something and they crossed at a conventional border crossing. They obviously were just not terribly bright. But this is where we start getting tensions with the USA. And it's only going to get worse. We can't keep track of our own immigration. Now, those 150,000 flagged student visas, you got to remember that they're saying they didn't have the resources to keep track of them. That's what these bureaucrats, these lazy bums in office, these snowflakes, the same sort of bums that we're talking about in the city of Calgary, who need, little squeeze toys and therapy dogs to do their job. They have 11,000 people in that department to keep track of this. 11,000 of them. What are they doing? Not a hell of a lot, are they? Fire them. Fire them. Fire 5,000 of them. What do we got to lose? They aren't doing a damn thing. They aren't worth crap. Fire them for incompetence. And you watch how fast the remaining 6,000 suddenly rediscover how to do their job. Because what's the government fighting with them for right now with federal civil servants? Because they want them to come back into the offices for 3 days a week. They've been working, and I'll put that in air quotes, from home. And you wonder why 150,000? And that's just student visa, guys. That's just one element of the mass immigration problem we've had. And again, it turns into other things. People saying, it's you can't criticize immigration. I'm not just criticizing immigration. We need immigration. I understand that. It's mass immigration that's the problem. It's uncontrolled immigration that's the problem. It's irresponsible immigration that's the problem. And having 150,000 flagged accounts, yet you apparently don't have a competent enough immigration department to follow through on those and deal with it. And you know what? If you started grabbing, finding, arresting, and deporting these bloody guys, gals, they would probably keep coming over because it's not getting them what they want, is it? Everybody's crapping on the U.S. with ICE. We need ICE in Canada too. We got a whole lot of people here we don't need here. We have over 700. I mean, this is from the incompetent intelligence and immigration people we have. We still know we have over 700 IRGC agents. These are Iranian Republican Guard agents in Canada. We know they're here. Why the hell are they here? Why have we not gotten them the hell out of our country? Well, we know they're here. We probably can't find them. Maybe they've gone south of the border. And this is where you think we got border problems now? Wait until if and when, and I hope it doesn't happen, one of these people who came from Canada goes down there and commits an atrocity. And it'd be because we didn't do our due diligence up here. Do you think Trump's going to respond well to that? You think that's going to make things better for us? All right. Well, speaking of loony left, yeah, that's something the NDP leadership's racing for anybody who knows or cares. The Western Standard recently put a story up. You can check that on there. That I think it's over half of the NDP members or supporters, known supporters of the NDP, don't even know who's running for the leadership of that party. Talk about dead in the water. And it cuts both ways. I love seeing socialists just go down. You know, they deserve it. But when we look at the political dynamic of Canada, the NDP, this is a gift to the Liberals because nobody's going to go from supporting the NDP and leap over to the Conservatives. Very few. Some from the labor, the real labor, trade unions, not the teachers' lounges, but trade unionists moved over to the Conservatives because they understand a bit about the economy. But public sector union members and so on, they are abandoning the NDP, but they're just going to the Liberals. The Liberals benefit from a dead NDP, and this NDP is dead. But they've gone too far left. They've overshot, and they don't understand it. And I was kind of laughing a bit about it online, but it shows something. Go woke, go broke. I mean, the NDP just went so far that barely anybody can handle these guys anymore, and it's not changing. It looks like under the nutcase is running for their leadership now. Just to show an analogy for anybody who's a Trekkie out there, Star Trek Starfleet Academy, one of their spin-offs, just abomination. I'm sure Gene Roddenberry wasn't dreaming of this. It had a gay Klingon and all sorts of stuff going on. It was just woke from end to end. And people say, well, no, Star Trek was always on the edge of things. Yeah, sure. It showed diversity. It showed, the original Star Trek. I mean, it had the first interracial kiss on TV, things like that were controversial at the time. But these were things that happened and were aspects of the show, within the show, which would be considered woke at the time. But still, 95% of the show was dealing with everything else. But these guys just push and push and push until eventually now it's just 95% woke crap that they're shoving in and 5% show. And guess what? Nobody watched it. It got canceled because it was crap. Go woke, go broke. The NDP's doing it as well. There is a backlash when they finally go too far. And that's what happened too with the Pride parades. I've talked about that before. I got dragged, and that's how it was back in the early 90s. I was a guy in my 20s. I was insecure, didn't know about these things too. We had to learn a lot. Dragged to Pride parades by a girlfriend back then. And actually, there were great events. Got to interact. That's what the point of it was. It was almost like a community outreach. I mean, there were still bathhouses getting raided by police in those days. There was still a lot of work to be done. People weren't able to get married to each other in those days. There was stuff to be done. And part of it was getting out in the community and say, look, we're just other community members. It's just that we have, same-sex preferences. So you get out there, you meet them, and you realize that. And it's a good time. People had fun. There's choirs. There's outfits. But the activists get hold of things, and they push it farther and farther. And then you get the nutcases. Then it's not just a fun family thing where you're interacting with other community members. Then it's perverts walking around in leather G-strings and waggling themselves in front of kids. And we see that at every bloody Pride parade every year. And the Pride organizers didn't have the courage to shut down those nutcases who are actually embarrassing their movement and making it worse. So corporate sponsors who used to line up to be able to help and get these events going have backed out. They said, we're done. We don't want a part of this anymore. Go woke, go broke. You're not saying that you're normal members of the community anymore. These events are making it look like you're fringe perverts. And I know most of the LGBTQ community aren't fringe perverts. But these Pride events sure don't make it look that way, do they? So they've lost the focus and the purpose of what the whole bloody thing was in the first place. They should let it go broke. The government shouldn't give them a nickel on any level. Raise money from the community, LGBTQ community, or people outside of that community who want to kick in on it. Start it again, go back to the grassroots, put things out that people want to participate in. Put out a benefit what your goal actually is rather than waggling your privates in front of kids. And I bet you these events will grow again. But you got to get back to where you started because they lost the narrative a long time ago. Moderate, LGBTQ people don't take part in that crap anymore. And it's not, you know what? We're allowed to criticize it again because, it became too politically incorrect for anybody to call it out for what it is in the past, but they overshot. One more shot on just a lunatic before I go. You probably heard about it. Jessica Yaniv, the man who was taking people to human rights commissions because they wouldn't wax his balls, is taking the Western Standard to the Human Rights Commission because we misgendered him. He's a man. He had balls. Sue us, Jessica. But these human rights commissions are a joke. The Standard isn't bowing down to it. And, I really don't care what you think, Ms. Yanov. All right, that's enough for today. Be sure to tune into the Pipeline tonight. We got Marty up north doing shows. Nigel's doing stuff. Leah's been doing great stuff. Subscribe to the channel. Share all that stuff. We're breaking the news. We can beat the legacy media guys and keep you informed. This is the way it's going to get done. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week at this time.